recording. Okay. All right. Today we're going to talk about deductions, net pay, and tips. Okay. So we kind of talked a little bit about deductions right away at the beginning of class with the warm-up. Can somebody give me a broad definition of deductions?
Money taken away from the pension.
Okay. I like this. We'll say money taken out of your, I don't want to say paycheck. I'm going to use the term gross pay because that's how much you would have been paid before that. Gross pay is how much they really owe you. And then they start taking away things. Examples. Social Security, Medicare, insurance, savings, taxes. There are more things than that, but that's mostly it. Okay, so what's net pay?
How much you eventually do make.
Yeah, this is what your actual paycheck is. How much your actual paycheck is. I'm going to write down gross pay minus deductions equals net pay. Okay. What is a tip? Like if you're tipping someone. Yep.
It's money you pay someone after you pay for the
Yep, it can be like for a waiter or a waitress, but there's also other jobs that could get tips. What? Bartender. So let's say extra money given for good service. You mentioned waiters, bartenders. Who else?
Hair people.
Hair people, so like a salon or a barber. Who else would you tip? Would you tip a teacher? No, there are certain professions you do not tip. Would you tip your doctor? Starbucks, yeah, we're gonna call that waiter. Barista counts under that, yeah? Mechanic, sometimes. Delivery, anything that's sent through delivery. People often tip if it's like I'm trying to think of a general word for Uber.
Delivery fooders.
What?
Rideshare.
Rideshare or maybe a driver. If somebody is driving somewhere for something.
Taxi guy.
Yep, a taxi driver or an Uber. Why do we tip these people?
They don't make a lot.
They don't make a lot, that's true. I mean, some of them do, depends on the job. A mechanic could make quite a bit of money depending on what the job is. But specifically waiters and bartenders, they don't even make minimum wage. Because their tips are considered kind of like part of their wage. So if you do not tip somebody, you're, especially with a waiter or a bartender, you're basically taking away part of their wage. Everybody else is kind of a little bit of an extra, maybe delivery too. Delivery is kind of a real low wage job. What is an appropriate tip?
10%.
So somewhere between 10% and 20%. 15's kind of the standard, 20% is what I prefer, and what a lot of people prefer, but depends on you. What if you don't tip them anything? You could do that if they're extremely rude to you. But generally, if they're a waiter or a bartender, you're tipping them something. Okay. Do you guys know how to figure out a tip in your head? Okay, first of all, do you know how like all the old people in your lives are always like, you're not always gonna have a calculator in your pocket? Literally, you do now. So that's pretty sweet. But also there's a pretty easy way to figure out tips in your head. So we're not gonna write this down, we're just gonna talk about it. So I'm just gonna move this for a second, so just pay attention, you don't have to write this down. Okay, let's say that you went out to dinner, you went out to a fancy dinner, and your bill is $58. Okay, how do we figure out 20% of $58?
20% of 50 is 10.
20% of 50 is 10, that's exactly right. Are you thinking about 10% and doubling it?
No, just that 20% of 100 is 20, so I just know that.
Nice. So one thing you can do is if you just think about moving the decimal, that's 10%. So $5.80, that's 10%. So what would 20% be? If we were gonna be exact, what would 20% be? $11.60. 5 times 2 is 10. 80 cents times 2 is $1.60. So it'd be $11.60. Do you have to tip exactly $11.60? No. Do you have to tip exactly $5.80? No, the idea is that you're tipping somewhere between here. If I was looking at this bill, in my head, I would probably say, okay, so if I rounded up to 60, it'd be $12 for me to pay 20%. So maybe I'll pay 12 bucks or $11.50 or something like that. I wouldn't even do the math. I would just get close in my head and do it that way. That make sense? Anybody have a different way to do it?
You give whatever's left in the change and give them some more.
So you're saying if you gave them 60 bucks and they gave you 2 bucks back?
You give them that and then 5 on every opening, 5 on all, so it seems like a good number.
Okay. Luckily, you've got good math sense, so you know that $2 is too little and that $20 would be a bit much. Unless what?
Unless it was good food.
Does good food mean a good tip? Do people share tips with the chef?
Something.
Sometimes.
You do.
You do? That's cool. It depends on the business. So, I mean, you could literally say to them, do you guys share tips? You could ask that. It might be a little rude. Or you could just wing it. But I would say, I'm gonna say like 60% of places don't share tips with the waiter, or with the people who cook the food. So really what you're truly tipping on usually is the service you're getting from the person who's bringing it out to you, and whether they're awesome or not. Okay. Are we okay with this? What if you were doing this on a calculator?
58 times
0.2 or 0.1 or what's 15%? 0.15. You're gonna need that, because we're gonna be doing that in a second on your worksheet, so go grab a calculator.
Are we done with this?
Vocab is done, you can put that away. This year, when I was doing school shopping for my kids, I told them each they could get like one